Welcome to Inside the Admissions Office. My name is Jason Goldlist, and today I'm going to take you behind the scenes, behind the application process, and into the world of Caroline Diarte-Edwards, the Director of Admissions, Marketing, and Financial Aid for the INSEAD MBA program, and also a graduate of the program from 2003. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jason.
What are the key criteria that you and the admissions team are looking for?
So the four criteria are academic capacity, leadership potential, international motivation, and then ability to contribute. So let me tell you a bit more about each of those. Academic capacity, we're looking at the academic track record of the candidate. It's important for INSEAD because it's a very rigorous program academically, and it's also an intensive program, being that it runs over 10 months. So it's important that candidates have the ability to keep up with the fast pace of the academic program here. So we'll be looking at the undergraduate institution where the candidate studied and the quality of the institution, the GPA that they gained, and then there's the GMAT. We also now accept the GRE as an alternative to the GMAT. With the GMAT, we advise candidates to target between the 70th and 75th percentile or above for both the quant and the verbal parts of the test. So we're looking more at the breakdown and whether they've reached that type of threshold than the overall score. Then we're looking at the professional dimension, so with an aim to assess the leadership potential, the long-term potential of the candidate. So we'll be looking at the career progress to date. Has the candidate had any particular achievements, been recognised for something that they've achieved in their career, perhaps had some promotion at work. We'll also be looking then at the recommendations and what the recommenders say about the candidate in a professional context. The third dimension, as I mentioned, is international motivation. So INSEAD is a very international community. We have over 80 different nationalities amongst the student body. So we're looking for candidates who have a real motivation to be in that type of community, who want to have an international career in the future, and they may have demonstrated that through past experience. So for example, perhaps they've studied abroad, perhaps they've worked abroad, perhaps they've learnt languages. If they haven't had much experience outside of their home country, then at least we're looking for a clear rationale for wanting to come to INSEAD and be in a very international community, and with the aim perhaps of having a more international career in the future. And then the fourth dimension is ability to contribute. So here we're looking for whether the candidate is someone who's going to be a student who's going to really get involved in classroom debate. As I'm sure you know, Jason, the experience here is very much about an exchange, it's about participation, it's not about the professors lecturing at the students and the students sitting there passively taking notes. It's very much an interactive experience. And so we're looking for candidates who are going to have interesting perspectives to share, who are going to be open about sharing those perspectives, who will be good at working in teams, because a lot of the academic program is based on teamwork. So does the candidate have the maturity and the skills to work well in a team environment? We're looking for candidates who will get involved in life on campus outside of the classroom. There's a lot of things going on outside of the classroom as well, and then hopefully he'll be engaged in the alumni network in the future.
When I first arrived on campus here at INSEAD, I was amazed at the diversity of the different students here. And it's not just the number of nationalities, but it's that there's no dominant nationality here on campus. How do you achieve this sort of diversity? Are there any quotas that you have to adhere to?
We don't actually have any strict quotas, but we are trying to craft as diverse a class as possible. Part of the way that we achieve that is through our marketing efforts. So we have a lot of outreach efforts to regions across the world, and we're fortunate in having incredible diversity in our applicant pool, which enables us then in the admissions process to focus more on selecting the best quality in that pool.
Even though there aren't any perfect profiles to be admitted to INSEAD, there is a language policy which does seem to include or preclude students or potential candidates from applying. Could you talk to us a little bit about the INSEAD language policy?
We do have a language policy, and so let me explain how it works for candidates coming into the program. Most of these students are actually non-native English speakers, so 80% of the student body are not native English speakers, and so they will need to demonstrate fluent English before they can be admitted, and then they have to have a second language, which would then be their native language. Then for candidates who are native English speakers, then they don't have to demonstrate their knowledge of English as it's their mother tongue, but they do need to demonstrate an intermediate knowledge of a second language, and that would need to be certified before they start the program. Then there is a requirement for graduation, which is a basic knowledge of a third language. So that's not a requirement for admission. You don't need to fulfill that before you come to INSEAD, but it is something that you will need to fulfill before you actually graduate from the program at the end of the day. So I would advise candidates to review the language policy, which is on the INSEAD website, to understand exactly how you will need to certify any languages, if you will need to certify languages before you come to INSEAD.
And who do you recommend that candidates get to recommend them?
We do prefer professional recommendations, so as opposed to academic recommendations, so from professors or people that are from your undergraduate institution, or for example a recommender from an extracurricular activity or someone who knows you socially. So our preference is definitely for professional recommendations where possible. A good choice would be, for example, a supervisor, so perhaps someone who's supervising you currently or someone who's supervised you in the past, or it could be a client who's worked with you. In any case, you should make sure that you choose someone who knows you well. Sometimes candidates choose a recommender who is extremely senior, perhaps the CEO of their company, because they think, you know, it's a big name, so it's very impressive that I've got this person as my recommender. But then that person hasn't necessarily had very much contact with the candidate and can't actually tell us as much about the candidate as we would like to know. So that doesn't actually stand the candidate in good stead.
And if a letter of recommendation isn't received by the deadline, does the application still get reviewed?
We won't actually review the application until all of the elements are complete.
Sometimes people describe the MBA admission process a little bit like a black box, where they hit submit on their application form and they just need to wait patiently, and then out comes the result. Could you tell us a little bit about what happens in between?
Sure. So when a candidate first submits the application, then it is reviewed in its entirety, and we'll make a selection of candidates who will be invited for interview. So that evaluation process takes about 6 weeks, and then after 6 weeks you will be informed if you've been selected for interviews. The interview process normally consists of 2 interviews with our alumni in the place where you're living. Then we'll get the interview reports back from the alumni, and then we evaluate the application again. Now we're not just reviewing at that stage the interview reports, we're evaluating the application in its entirety. So 2 separate evaluators will review the application with all of the elements that you've submitted, as well as the interview reports. And then your file is presented to the admissions committee. The admissions committee is comprised of about 10 faculty and 10 alumni, and they take all of the decisions on who is finally admitted to the program. The decisions that they can take can either be to admit a candidate, to reject a candidate, to waitlist the candidate, or also they have the option of what we call postpone a candidate, which is when they see a candidate that they really like, but perhaps the person has applied way too early, perhaps they only have a year to 18 months of work experience, and they judge that it's too early for them to come to INSEAD, and so we'd advise them to work for another year or 2, perhaps gain some more international experience before coming back to us.
If an applicant is unsuccessful, should they reapply to the INSEAD MBA program?
We don't actually normally encourage reapplications. What we often find is that if a candidate applies with the same profile after having been rejected, then the decision will be consistent with the decision that was previously given by the admissions committee. Having said that, if there is a substantial change in the profile, so for example, if they've had a promotion, they've changed some aspect of their career. Perhaps they've relocated to a different country, and so there is a substantial difference in their profile versus when they previously applied. Then it could be worth applying again and being reconsidered by the admissions committee.
What are the interviews like for all of our potential candidates out there applying for the MBA program?
So normally you'd have 2 interviews with 2 separate alumni. We normally try to match the alumni to your profile so that one alumnus has a similar profile to you, perhaps from a similar industry, and then one from a different background. And then I would suggest that you approach it as you would a job interview. So do prepare for the interview. Do be professional, but also be yourself. We're really looking to understand what is special about you, what drives you, what motivates you to come to INSEAD. The alumni are trying to get a sense for, whether you're a good fit for the program, whether you have the qualities to succeed at INSEAD, whether you're someone that they would like to have as part of their network when you graduate. And also we get very useful information from the alumni on the softer skills of the candidate. So they can give us good information on interpersonal skills, communication skills that can be more difficult to evaluate purely from a paper application.
Caroline, thank you so much for taking us behind the scenes at the admissions office.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jason.